I think in the interest of time, we can start the session today. So, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Orko Mitra. I'm from CII, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome all of you on board for this wonderful masterclass today. To start off proceedings, may I request Ms. Anjali Bais, member of the CII National Committee on Leadership in HR, to set the context with your introductory remarks. Over to you, Anjali, ma'am.
Thank you, Arka. Hello, Constantine. I'll address you as Dino. And very, very warm welcome to all the participants joining in. You can hear the beeps, so the participants continue to enter as we talk. Very warm welcome to this session here on the trait emotional intelligence theory. My name is Anjali Bais, and as Arka just introduced me, I'm a member of the CII National Committee on Leadership in HR. And in another hat that I wear, I am the group CHRO for STL Sterlite Technologies. So coming to the session today, this master class is actually being hosted by the CII Suresh Neotia Center of Excellence for Leadership. This center has been really at the forefront of creating next-gen leadership capabilities for the Indian industry for more than a decade, actually about 15 years. And it's really a part of building competitiveness in the industry. It's based in Calcutta, for those of you who are aware of the center, and just a range of things that the COE does. Master classes like the one we are having today is just one amongst many things that it does. You have learning journeys, you have a host of strategic interventions that are done through the center, but the core remains really building next-gen transformational leaders by empowering them with cutting-edge leadership practices. And that's a great segue to our session today, because we are really here today to listen in and learn from Professor Dino about a cutting edge practice, insight, tool. It's all of it rolled in together. Professor Dino doesn't really require an introduction. He's really a globally recognized authority in the space of emotional intelligence, and we are extremely honored to have him here. For those of you who know, he is a pioneer in this area and the developer of the trait emotional intelligence theory, and therefore the linked trait emotional intelligence questionnaire. And it's used globally, not just in corporate settings, but also in scientific, medical settings. It's got a host of applications, including in the human resource function. It's used for selection of people, leadership development, even well-being, a very, very topical subject in today's times. A lot of people also use it for tailoring personal growth plans of talent. So with a tool that has got such a diverse application and could be so valuable in creating next-gen talent for the workplace, what better opportunity than having Professor Dino being here with us. He is the first ever professor of psychometrics at UCL. And his work is really out there, a benchmark in what can happen in terms of fantastic, powerful tools and applications. So here's a unique opportunity for us to engage with Professor Dino, and I encourage everyone to actively engage during the session. I don't want to stand between you and the session, because I don't want to take all the airtime that we really blocked between you and to you, Dino, to the entire lovely audience. To ensure a seamless experience, please do switch on your videos. It's just so much more interactive, but keep your microphones on mute. Any question comes to your mind, feel free to type it into the chat box, and Dino promises to answer them in the Q&A section. So enjoy the session. I'm sure it's going to be an enriching one. Over to you, Dino.
Thank you so much, Anjali, for this wonderful introduction. I really appreciate it. the honor is all mine. I'm tremendously delighted and honored to be able to address such an august audience in the Confederation of Indian Industry. Again, I would like to thank Anjali Bais for extending this invitation, Arka Mitra and all the team there who have made this possible in such a short space of time. So it's a tremendous opportunity and occasion for me. And before I start, I would also like to thank Mr. Rajat Mishra, who is the CEO of Afcon Strabag, who has organized and facilitated the introductions. And I'm actually sitting today in the headquarters of Afcon Strabag in Delhi. So Gurugram, to be more precise. So I'm also grateful to him. I'm grateful for everyone who organized this event and to everyone who is participating. So I hope we're going to have a great session today. I'm very pleased that we have 2 hours. An iteration of this masterclass was given last week. I had the opportunity to give it in Ahmedabad and also in IIM Ahmedabad and IIM Kozhikode later, but we only had 1 hour available there. So inevitably, we had to skip some slides. We have the opportunity to actually go into more depth today. There's so much that we can cover together. I'm very keen to make the session interactive. There's going to be a Q&A in the end anyway, but if somebody would wish to make a question or share some perspective or some private experience or complain about something, why not? Please feel free to do that while I am presenting the material so we can make it more interactive. Otherwise, we'll take questions, comments towards the end. So everything's being amazingly organized. Everything's working swimmingly well. Certainly, it looks like we have the favor of the gods here. No technical problems. So why don't I get started? You should all have received a copy of the handouts, and if you haven't, then I'm sure they will be distributed to you in shortly after the talk, so you can have all the details about how to connect with me through my LinkedIn account or check out our websites and so on and so forth, and actually have the material in your hands. So I'll be speaking about my theory today. It's on trait emotional intelligence, and it's one of the foremost models of emotional intelligence globally. It's a theory that's being applied across a very diverse range of scientific and commercial fields, which is quite rare in this day and age, because you will have noticed, I'm sure most of you, that we have entered an age of over-specialization. So we tend to know, or individuals, experts, so-called experts, tend to know more and more things about smaller and smaller areas of inquiry. So it's quite rare to have a theory that spans so many different scientific fields, so many different domains of practical application, as you will see later on today. The TQ, you will see here, we pronounce it TQ, just the T and the Q, the consonants. So that's the measurement vehicle of the theory. Anyone who wants to apply the theory, engage the theory, interact with the theory, they need to use the TQ in order to measure the traits and emotions and perceptions that are involved in the theory. So the TQ, as a measurement vehicle of the theory, is commercially available today in over 20 different languages. It's being used in almost every country of the world. And it's been scientifically validated, if you like, over hundreds and hundreds of studies. There is a huge scientific bibliography for the instrument. In terms of utilization, it's being used by every kind of corporation organization from small to mid-size, okay? And actually the bulk of the application and utility is in small and middle-sized enterprises, but some big organizations have also used the instrument over the years, governmental, non-governmental, from the defense sector, all sorts of different commercial domain sectors and sports sectors and so on and so forth around the world. The biggest market, I should say, in terms of volume of sales for quite some time has been India. And I'm very happy for this because, of course, India is not a market. I mean, it's probably like 35 different markets, or, well, I don't know if it's going to be as many markets as there are states, but certainly there are multiple markets in India. And I've always been very pleased and delighted that the instrument has taken over here, because the instrument really is about psychology, it's about emotions, and ultimately is about spirituality. So if you want to choose one country in the world where you want to be successful with such kind of instrument, that is India. But not the US, not the UK, not any Western country. If you were to choose one country, if I had to choose one country where we want to have success with my instrument, I started 25 years ago with saying the number one country, the number one testing ground has to be India, because that's where it's all at, to use this expression. It's like, if you actually make it in India with this kind of instrument, you can make it anywhere else in the world. So I'm very pleased to say that it's been our biggest market for quite some time now, even though the offering currently in India is very basic. We're only offering a very basic, simple report for the TQ from a gamut of products that comprises over 20 different reports and instruments. We're only have a basic offering we've had available here for quite some time, but it's been our biggest market, and I'm very, very happy about that. Now, I would like to indulge very quickly, if I may, into my system of psychobionomy, because all of my work is really derived from that general system of psychobionomy. Trait emotional intelligence theory is an outshoot of this general system of psychobionomy and everything else that I've done. I've got other theories as well, like belief importance theory, many different measures, psychometric measures, many different TQ reports and reports from other instruments. They all derive somehow from this general system of psychobionomy. I'd like to say a few things here, because this is really the culture and the country that has a chance of appreciating the system. Now, this system has not been of great interest, I have to say, in the West, because the West is really focused on numerics, numbers, publications, return on investment, and these things are quite important, and we will be talking about these things mainly in the masterclass today. But I think the philosophy and the philosophical background of any psychological theory is also very important. So we're not dealing with something that's quite surface here. We're dealing with something that's very, very deep, this general system of psychobionomy. So psychobionomy is a combination of three Greek words: psyche, which in the original Greek language, in classical Greek, means soul. It does not mean mind. Certainly doesn't mean body. It means soul or spirit. And I make this distinction between psychology today, as we understand it, especially in the West, is really the study of the mind and the study of behavior. That's what it really means. So psyche, in the modern usage in the Western world, has come to mean the mind and behavior. And increasingly, it is deteriorating, if you like, to refer to the body, a specific part of the body, actually, which is the brain. So the Western psychologists more and more focus on the brain, which is a part of the body. And of course, they keep studying the mind. And by psychology, they mean this lore of work that concerns the brain and the mind and behavior. However, in the original meaning of the word, psyche referred to soul, and soul is something very different from the mind, something very different from the body, something far more fundamental. So in psychobionomy, I use the term psyche to refer to that original soul or spirit or consciousness. Bio means life, so this three-dimensional life as we experience it in our everyday quotidian living. And the suffix nomi means law and the arrangement of law. So psychobionomy. It combines the soul, the life, and the laws of life, because this life is subject to laws, not just the physical laws that many of us are familiar with, like the law of gravity and so many different laws of thermodynamics. There's so many different laws that we are, especially the physicists, are very familiar with. But there are laws that govern the mind. Now, this country, this culture, of course, has been studying these laws for many, many years. And this is where we have a law of cause and effect, for example, the law of karma. Now, these are laws that are very significant. They cannot be proven scientifically in the manner that the physical laws can be proven, but they are no less true for that. So psychobionomy seeks to discover, arrange, and utilize the laws of spirit and life, of which the law of karma, the law of cause and effect, is just one, even if very basic, very fundamental and important example of such a law. How can we discover these laws, and how can we actually apply them in order to make our life more fulfilling, more satisfying, more centered on the things that matter? That's what psychobionomy tries to do. The system psychobionomy draws very heavily from Vedantic philosophy, especially Advaita Vedanta. As I was developing it, and this has been my main focus of interest, at least in the last 12 years, trait emotional intelligence has been very, very successful around the world, and the TQ, extremely successful. And this is what has allowed me to delve into more philosophical aspects and to more spiritual aspects of life that do not have an immediate reward in the outside world. See, where I am based in the university and in my own company, because I run my own company as well, results are always expected, and I respect that. That a lot of times leaves you with very little time to do anything else. I've been very lucky and blessed with the theory of trait emotional intelligence and the TQ, in that they have financed my lifestyle, which has been really the investigation of philosophical and especially the Vedic sciences. I have spent an enormous amount studying the Vedic sciences, and that's how I fell in love with India and the culture here eventually. And they have informed my thinking to a very great extent. And I can even give specific references. I'm not giving this, I'm not saying this as some kind of generality that I've been influenced by the Vedic sciences, generally speaking. I can give very specific references for where I have drawn inspiration. For example, the whole system of psychobionomy was inspired by Sri Atmananda Krishna Menon. Now, Sri Atmananda is, for those of you who are interested or familiar with Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta specifically, you will know, of course, Ramana Maharshi, which is a huge sage in that tradition, very popular in the West as well. Nisargadatta Maharaj of Calcutta, also very popular, very big in the West. And the third person is Sri Atmananda, who's becoming more and more popular. And there are the Notes on Spiritual Discourses by Sri Atmananda. You can actually download it from the internet. They were being kept by one of his disciples, Nityatripta. And so there are over 1,000 notes and observations that Sri Atmananda gave in his satsangs. Note number 448, which has two parts. To be very specific, the second part of note 448, is really the inspiration for the whole system of psychobionomy. Of course, I've been influenced by many other sages in the Vedic tradition and from other traditions as well. Obviously, the classical Greek philosophers and Western philosophers, but the vast majority of the influence is coming from the from Vedic civilization. And I have actually found out, I think I'm veering off into tangents right now, but I have found that a lot of what is recognized as highest philosophy in the West by Western psychologists, by Western philosophers, psychologists, and Western scientists actually had been previously discussed in the Vedic sciences. Now, I'm not saying that it's been copied, or even though in this day and age, of course, that everybody's copying everybody else. But let's say in the chronological development of things, I'm not suggesting that the Western cultures actually copied the Vedic sciences, but certainly that most of the fundamental truths, maybe all of the fundamental truths, were actually discussed in great detail in the Vedic civilization lore chronologically before they were discovered in the West. Certainly, that's been my own observation. So having said all that, and that really is the influence and inspiration for my psychobionomic system, which informs everything else that I do, including, of course, trait emotional intelligence, which is what I am known for internationally, and which is the contribution that has actually been opening doors for me. So I'm going to be focusing on trait emotional intelligence from now on, which is a theory that attempts to do what? Integrate personality traits, emotions, and intelligence broadly defined. So we're looking for a theory that integrates these three domains, tries to understand these three domains, how they impact the individual, and how they impact the individual's behavior in the world, including, of course, the occupational domain. But hopefully it's becoming clear from what I've been saying that I don't see the occupational work domain as something that's separate, different from the rest of the life of the individual. The individual lives an integrated life, and his or her performance and existence in the world of work needs to be understood in the more general context of their holistic existence. It's not fruitful. It is possible to attempt to dissect that, and many models and products out there in the world of work actually do that, and they have occupational personality questionnaires or occupational behavior questionnaires and occupational leadership instruments and so on and so forth, as if somebody's personality is different when they go to work and when they are at home and so on and so forth. That's a very fragmented way of trying to understand an individual, and it doesn't work in the long term. So we're trying to achieve an integrated understanding of personality traits, emotions, and intelligence for the individual. And when you achieve that, you can also understand the advantages and disadvantages, pros and cons for this individual in the world of work, including how they relate to other people. One of the most basic and fundamental aspects of trait emotional intelligence in the TQ is to do with perceptions, what we believe about ourselves, about the world, and about others, the fundamental perceptions that guide our relating to the world. These are extremely important because they have a creative influence. What we believe about ourselves, what we believe about the world, what we believe about other people create the kind of experiences that we have to go through. Now, that's a difficult concept for many to understand because they think that behavior in this world is like random. So a fundamental perception that most people have is that they are this body. So they believe that they are this body, and therefore that sort of encloses them, encases them into this physical presence and separates them from everything else around them. Now, that creates a very specific kind of life trajectory, which is the small me enclosed and encased in this body versus the enormous universe. This has a creative influence in terms of what this kind of the individual holding this kind of perception is going to meet in their life. You live one type of life if you have this self-perception that you are this body, and a completely different life if you have a different self-perception, like, for example, the self-perception that you are consciousness. But there are other perceptions as well, very important perceptions that create experiences in our life, like the perception of scarcity. Okay, so many individuals live with this kind of self-perception that life is hard, that I need to work very hard to make a living. I need to go to work, and work is a very difficult place, and other people are out to get me because we are
এটা
all
হ্যাঁ
competing
এটা আমি আপনার সাথে ডিসকাস করবো একটা আলাদা করে।
for a limited pot of resources. So having this kind of understanding again creates certain types of experiences for you. So one of the things that we're hoping to do through trait emotional intelligence, the TQ, is to find out what kind of perceptions an individual holds, at least the conscious perceptions, because there are a lot of perceptions that are subconsciously lodged. They're in the subconscious of the individual. The individual doesn't even know she has those self-perceptions. They're just lodged in the subconscious mind, and unless they're smoked out from there, they will never know that they're affecting their life experiences and their life trajectories. But we are working a lot with perceptions and self-perceptions and trait emotional intelligence, because these are the building blocks of life. They are far more important than what sort of family you're born in, what kind of resources you have available. They are far, far more important, far, far more powerful than such other factors in one's life trajectory. Now, that doesn't mean that they're easier to change. Now, some people think, well, I can change myself. That's not the case. It's, in fact, it may well be a lot easier to build a big fortune, or to build a big company, or to operate or to land a top job than to change your self-perception. So there's so many examples out there of this. I don't want to be naming individuals a lot, but you can look around in the world of politics, in the world of business, and you can see how many individuals have built tremendous empires, and they still operate from a sense of scarcity, or from a win-lose kind of mentality, that I have to win, and therefore this means that you have to lose. So it's a duality, a perception of duality that descends and governs the individual, which constantly creates conflict in their life. No matter how much they achieve in the outside world, they're still dominated by this conflict and by these limiting self-perceptions. So trait emotional intelligence is an established field in psychology today. I mean, I started it about 25 years ago in my PhD. Today, it's become an established field in psychology, and there are hundreds and hundreds of peer-reviewed journal publications. Now, I'm giving you a little bit about the science of the theory and the instrument, and then we're going to move into commercial corporate applications. But I want you to know that this is a theory and an instrument that has philosophical underpinnings, which for many individuals is entirely irrelevant. I understand that. I think it's tremendously significant, but I understand that for many individuals, it's neither here nor there. Beyond the philosophical underpinnings, there are the scientific underpinnings. Again, I understand that for many individuals in the world of work, in the real world, if you're outside the ivory tower, again, I understand that this may not be significant. But for many, it is significant, because they want an evidence-based kind of model, or evidence-based models, theories, and measures to apply in their everyday life. They don't want something that's been rustled up, no matter how much oomph and marketing and hype stands behind it. They want something that's evidence-based. So that's why I'm saying about this one slide here on the scientific penetration of trait emotional intelligence. You can see here year 2000, 2001. These are a number of scientific peer-reviewed publications. Okay, there's one in 2000, one in 2001, one in 2002. These are publications coming out of my PhD. So if you go to 2024, and the data here are not complete because the databases are still being updated, but you can see here there's about 80 to 100 publications annually now. Every year, 100 publications on trait emotional intelligence. And it is an underestimate, because much of the scientific literature and the commercial literature, by the way, commercial applications, are being conducted under generic terms like EQ, competencies, emotional competencies, emotional intelligence. They're not making direct references to trait emotional intelligence, even though that is the theory they're applying, even though the TQ is the instrument that they're using to deliver those applications or carry out this research, but they're using generic terminology and I can't pick it up in these searches. So these are searches specifically on trait emotional intelligence, the theory. And you can see about 100 publications a year being published today. This is a slide now that sort of gives a flavor of the areas of application of the TQ. What do companies, this concerns, of course, commercial usage, and the talk now is becoming more occupational focused, commercial usage, corporation usage. Not discussing the areas of application in science, because we have scientific applications literally across the board. All areas of psychology, in business, in management, in the medical field, all areas of business, or all areas of leadership. So these are all this research that's being carried out within the trait emotional intelligence framework. These are now on the slide that you see here are applications, commercial applications. So the instrument and the theory is being used for sales, performance, a lot for selection and recruitment, career counseling and development, communication skills. How do we communicate with our colleagues? How do we communicate initiatives within a company? How do we communicate between companies? How can we communicate between our company and the government, and so on and so forth? This is the whole gamut of communication skills. Entrepreneurship, decision-making, self-development and self-improvement, leadership and management, performance appraisals, and so on and so forth. I won't discuss all these, each one individually, but these are all different applications of theory of trait emotional intelligence and the TQ. Now, what is that enables this kind of penetration? That's an interesting question, because as I've been saying before, it is very rare today, both in science and in industry, to find out models, theories, and instruments that have such a diverse field and of application. What really allows and enables all this? Thank you. What really allows and enables all this is the importance of emotions in our everyday life. Emotions are extremely important in our everyday life. They affect all kinds of decisions that we take, all kinds of behavior that we manifest in the world, all kinds of experiences that are drawn to us. All of these decision-making experiences that we draw to us and so on and so forth have emotional motivators. If you analyze our behaviors or our decisions, if you take them to the very beginning, you'll find out always that there's some kind of emotion involved. And because emotion is ubiquitous in our everyday life, an instrument that measures emotions and emotional perceptions reliably and validly, like the TQ, and explains them and analyzes them like trait emotional intelligence, will inevitably have success in almost across the board. I don't think that there's been any area or any domain of industry or work or any other area that we've applied the TQ and we've got null results. Emotions are always involved to some extent or the other. Not everything is emotionally based, and there are other very important factors to be sure, but emotions are the fuel that really drives our behavior and our decision-making in the real world. You'll find out, for example, I don't know if I had the chance to talk a little bit more about this, but you are the best audience for this. Like I know there are a lot of HR experts among the audience today. If you're dealing with conflict and you're trying to manage conflict in the workplace, which very often is the case, you'll find out, I'm sure you have noticed, that the vast majority of these conflicts and confrontations and arguments are emotionally based. Like, it's not that even if it appears that there's some kind of disagreement in terms of objective, cold, hard decision-making, underneath that, there's always some kind of personality clash. The personalities are incompatible. The emotions are involved. Very rarely you'll have conflicts in the workplace that are purely objectively or technically driven, that we have a big argument because somebody wants to use this kind of software, somebody else wants to use a different kind of software, or go into this kind of merger versus a different kind of merger, and everybody's focused on the technicalities of the decision. The conflicts and the arguments always spring from personality clashes, from emotional behavior, and so on and so forth. So that's why this theory and this instrument are so important, and have seen such huge uptake in HR departments internationally. These are some of the companies, are very small. As I said, the majority of our usage is from small and medium-sized companies. So this is not like by any means representative of the type of companies that use the TQ, but these are companies that have used or featured the TQ in the past, and they are globally recognized, if you like. That's why I have them on this slide. It's a very, very, very small snippet, a subset of the general usage of the instrument internationally. So what do they use it for? I've given some examples already, and here are some more. Leadership, I didn't say a lot about leadership, but leadership is about emotions, isn't it? Of course, we have to make it a distinction between two different types of leadership, of the leadership in being, which is the natural leadership. You have individuals who are natural leaders, and they know how to lead others, and they know what needs to be done in a leadership position, versus individuals who occupy leadership positions. This is a very different kind of leadership. So there are many individuals who have managed to climb up the greasy pole and occupy leadership positions without having any leadership qualities whatsoever. I'm not particularly interested in this today. I'm interested in individuals who have leadership effectiveness and who are natural leaders. So we are finding out that leaders that have optimized trait emotional intelligence are better equipped to handle the complexities of administration, large-scale operations, because you need to be able to understand the emotions of the individuals you are managing, you are leading, in order to be able to lead them, to inspire them, to transform them, to do something positive with them and through them. Yes. Now, you don't necessarily need that if you're a leader, if you're occupying a leadership position, because you're trying to achieve things simply by carrot and stick. You only have these two possibilities. Either you'll threaten somebody to do something, or you'll try and give them an incentive. But that's not really leadership. We're talking about leadership that inspires, leadership that gets people to do things, people to buy in your plans, right? So many examples in this country, from Gandhiji and Nehru. So these are, and many more recent, but I don't want to get into recent politics and this kind of domain. But we are talking about natural leaders. And natural leaders understand the emotions, the capabilities, the needs, and the aspirations of the individuals who they are trying to lead and manage. Trait AI is always used in safety, crisis management, decision-making during emergencies. We have to make a lot of decisions during emergency, short space of time, or through lack of information. Our ability to understand our emotions, handle our emotions, is extremely important for getting things right. Employee relations, I spoke about before, and I said how many of the conflicts in the workplace are really emotionally, not always, but the vast majority, there will be the result of personality clashes and emotional incompatibilities. On the right-hand side of the slide, you see some of the companies that have used emotional intelligence, or EQ competencies, models, theories, and instruments, and you will recognize them. These are a lot of the companies that actually use most, I would say, that use these kinds of models and programs, workshops, and instruments, and they don't want to go public about it. So they're very reticent about what kind of methodologies they used, what kind of structures, models. They just don't want to talk about it or make them public because it's considered proprietary information. But many companies have actually agreed to go public with that. And you have some examples there for L'Oreal using EQ competencies, as they call them, for sales productivity, just simply to increase sales. Because, okay, if we talk about sales, how do you clinch a sale? If we're not talking about forced sales, so sales of goods where somebody needs to buy because they don't have a choice, like, for example, during the COVID area, if you wanted to travel, you had to take these COVID tests, right? So everybody had to take, otherwise you couldn't travel. Now that doesn't require like any sales acumen. I mean, you're going to make a sale because it's absolutely required. But in most cases, the cases that you need to be able to clinch a sale. Right? There are competitors who are trying to sell competitive products or alternatives, and you need to be able to make an argument. You need to be able to clinch a sale. In other words, the target has an option to either buy or not buy. Now, emotions are the most important trigger and lever that somebody has as a salesperson in order to clinch a sale. In many cases, again, I am excluding those cases where the target or the customer needs to make a purchase because either you get tested or you don't fly, or there is a huge difference in terms of pricing. So the product is identical and the only factor that can change is pricing. But we're talking about those cases where the customer needs to make a decision, a true decision. There's a multidimensional decision. There, the importance of being able to understand, to empathize with the customer, understand their needs, and be able to convince them is entirely or virtually entirely emotionally based, and hence the importance of emotional competencies programs in these situations. Sales productivity more generally, PepsiCo, here's another example here, that implemented EQ competencies frameworks that led to gains in productivity, decrease in turnover, and there are a lot of scientific studies that are actually supporting these results. There's a lot of usage in the defense industries internationally as well. So these are just some areas and case studies that we can talk about. There are a whole lot more. And of course, there's interest, and there has always been interest in the media on this topic. And before I came here, I did a very quick search on the internet. Said, okay, what is the situation in India? Is it, do you find any articles about the importance of emotions in the workplace? And there's loads. I mean, these 4 that you see on your screen there are literally from the last 12 months. So you see from Times of India, how important is emotional intelligence in leadership? Economic Times, Indian Railways make EQ test mandatory for top posts. Now, I'm not at all in favor of mandatory initiatives, but that tells you that they have understood. Now, these companies, these organizations have understood the importance of emotions, particularly for top posts. I would say across the board, but particularly for top posts, because if you occupy a senior post in an organization and you can't understand emotions in others, in yourself, you don't know how to use them, that creates a lot of friction, and that rolls down to the rest of the company, or spreads across the company much faster than if you're somebody who doesn't have, these personality characteristics, this personality knowledge, but occupies an entry-level position. From the top posts, you can wreak havoc if you're unable to control and understand your emotions. And we see that every day. I'd say if you open the newspapers, there's going to be another story of some kind of leader in the commercial or political world who couldn't face disaster or face the unraveling simply because if you analyze, you will see they could not control their emotions. They could not control their emotion of fear, for example, the emotions of anger, the emotions of greed. They can greed, and then they drag the whole organization down with them. So Indian Railways understood all these things and made the test mandatory for top posts. Hindustan Times, managers love emotional intelligence. Man explains why he quit Netflix for Amazon. Emotional intelligence is necessary for you in any field. Here is why. And I'm telling you why. It's because emotions are important in every field of endeavor, because they're important in the life of the individual. That, this is the sequence of events. Because they're important for me, for you, they're important for everything that we do as well. But they're important for us as individuals, irrespective of what type of work we're doing, or if we're doing any work at all. I mean, you may not be doing any work, either because you're a student or unemployed, or you've left the world. Okay, so all those sadhus that leave the world, and they have to deal with it. That's one of the first things that they need to conquer: their emotional constitutions, their emotional pressures, their inner emotionality. Everybody has to deal with their emotions. So if you've chosen to operate in the world of work out there in society, you are going to have to deal with your emotions as well as with the emotions of other people. Now, having said that, it is the case that some individuals can do that without any training, without any kind of understanding. They're naturals. There are individuals who can naturally understand these things and apply them. They're a small minority, but they are naturals, and they don't need any training. They just have it in them. But for the vast majority of us, we do need some training, and we can benefit from training. We can benefit from coaching. We can benefit from somebody showing us how to understand these, at least initially, and then after that we can grow on our own. But initially, we do need somebody to actually show us the ropes, if you like. But it is the case that some individuals have this naturally. Okay. It's important to keep this in mind. And speaking about psychometrics more generally, I don't have a sense of how many of you use psychometrics in your organization. I know that the industry is becoming bigger and bigger in India for many years now. That's a recent article from the New York Times. They seem to estimate the psychometrics industry in the US in the area of $2 billion annually. Why? Because psychometrics allow us for objective evaluation of an individual's constitution, right? Insights into candidates' abilities and traits, and that helps with hiring decisions, prevents costly and recruitment mistakes. One big advantage of psychometrics, so I'm talking about psychometrics more generally here, not just the TQ. One big advantage of psychometrics is that even the best instruments out there, of course, you can make big mistakes by getting stuff that's like rustled up. They're quick and dirty, and they have a lot of marketing oomph, but very little science behind them. That's very typical. But let's say about psychometric instruments that have been properly validated and taken to the market, and they have large evidence bases. Now, these instruments present tremendous value for money when you take into account what's involved in a business operations. Like, even if you let's take like a very simple example of hiring someone for a entry-level job. Now, that person, you need to spend time interviewing them, checking their credentials, getting them on board, the so-called onboarding phase, possibly training them. Then you pay their salary. Then you find out 6 months down the line, 1 year down the line, that this person doesn't want to work in the company, or they don't get along with the team, or they don't get along with the manager, or they were never interested in the jump and go somewhere else. Now, the amount of money that's been spent there, recruiting this person, showing them the ropes, training them, onboarding them, and then they go in 6 months, 1 year, or a year and a half, is very, very significant. Now, typically with psychometrics, you can get an insight into this individual for, I don't know, $50 or $100, something like that. So it's a very small investment that can be made that minimizes wrong decision making. I'm not saying it eliminates it. Okay, you can still go wrong with psychometrics, absolutely. But at least you will have made an effort to see beyond checking the surface credentials of an individual. Do they have an engineering degree? Can they speak Hindi? Do they speak foreign languages? Can they write well? I mean, do they present well? The stuff that's easy to check. The technical abilities of an individual are fairly straightforward to check. You know, can they operate Excel? Can they operate Microsoft Word? These are easy things to check. What's harder to check is, will this individual fit my team? Will they fit my organizational culture? Will they be able to get along with the boss? Will they like their job? These are all emotionally driven and personality driven aspects. Or how do I communicate with this individual? Okay, like different people are susceptible to different types of communication. Some people appreciate direct style communication. Others appreciate a more roundabout, softer style of communication, and so on and so forth. Different people take decisions in different ways. Some people are more impulsive, other people are more deliberative. So all these things come into play with psychometrics. And we're trying to assess and evaluate the individual, every individual in the work environment, not just one, every individual in the work environment, to make better teams, better companies, better organizational cultures. That doesn't mean that we're going to get it right every single time, but you have a much greater likelihood of reducing conflict, reducing problems, reducing challenges when you do this due diligence. You have to do it. So otherwise, if a company doesn't pay any attention to these things, then there's just reckless behavior. And when the tide is high and the times are good, then it doesn't particularly matter. But when challenges come and hit the sector, hit the industry, hit the company, then these things come out in the surface and they can actually sink a company or cost it an enormous amount of money. So this human component, this human element, this human resources element in an organization is completely and utterly crucial. Not just a big organization, I would say, as I've been saying from the beginning, most of our usage is in small and medium sized companies. In other words, even small companies that have limited budgets tend to spend a lot of time and resources on the human resources component of the organizations, and they bring in psychometrics and training programs and so on and so forth. I'm going to start going a little bit faster because I'm enjoying this, but I'm aware that I've got more slides to go through. And if we don't cover all the slides, I'm very happy to take specific questions on slides that I didn't cover. So if you've got the slides at your end, you can say, can you please go and say a few things about slide number 27? If we haven't done so, I'm happy to do it. So this is an article here from the Times of London, I believe. Emotion is an essential part of every good business. Well, emotion is an essential part of every good and every bad business as well. And why? Because emotion is such an essential part of every individual. It's an essential part of you and I. So this cannot be separated, severed, and taken out from the world of work because it's more convenient for us. You can't do that. So your emotions come to you at work and they come with you at home, and you can't dissociate or sever this part of yourself from you. They come and they're very, very important in terms of determining behavior, decision-making, relationships with other individuals. These are now some, I want to get a little bit more practical here, and these are some case studies from the TQ, the Trait Emotional Intelligence and the Trait Emotional Intelligence questionnaire. These are organizations that have accepted to go public with their programs. As I said, this is becoming increasingly rare these days because companies are very protective of their ways of operation, the proprietary stuff, and what methodologies, what instruments, what suppliers they use. But these are companies, and from some time ago, where things were a little bit, I find that as we go along and as we go into the future, that people and companies are becoming more cagey, more protective, more what's the word? Clandestine about their potential competitive advantages. But these come from some years ago. Things were a little more relaxed. So this is a building society in the UK serving a large number of customers. That's a large number of customers for UK standards. I understand in India that would probably be maybe small or medium, but in the UK, that's a large customer base. So they use the TQ for executive team development. It's very important for the executive team to get along, and that's not always the case. And I know that many of the audience today sit on executive boards, so you know what's going on. You don't need me to explain. So executive team development, conflict management is another classic one. Reduce conflict or smooth out conflict when conflict occurs. Professional development, yes, that's another important one. And I always say that there are our perceptions that I mentioned before, the perception that we have about ourselves, the perceptions that we have about the world, including our company, including our co-workers, managers, subordinates, and so on and so forth, place ceilings in terms of what we can achieve. They are very important. It's not the case that if you hold a very limiting set of perceptions, like a lot of people do, and they always, they tend to think negative thinking, let me put it this way, is like self-harming. Yes. In reality, that's not some kind of philosophy. It's not some kind of poetry. It's not some kind of like coaching insight. It is a fact of life that when you have limiting self-perceptions, these self-perceptions limit you in the world. So if I start saying that, oh my God, I'm just getting too old. How am I going to make it in this world? Everybody's younger, and now we have AI, and they know IT, and I don't know IT. Or how am I going to make it because I don't speak like native English, and they speak native English, and I can write as well as they can write. I don't have enough resources. So these are the things that reverberate. Well, I can make it because I'm a woman, and all these things that reverberate in the mind. These things place limits in terms of what we can achieve. So I've met, when I used to do it, I've pretty much stopped doing that, but doing like a coaching of executive coaching. I met so many individuals who were technically brilliant. They had everything. I mean, if you looked at their CV, it just ticked every single box, but they couldn't go beyond a certain level in the organization. They were really stuck, like at the VP level or head of division level, and they couldn't break through. And I was always trying to convince them, sometimes successfully, other times not. Because, of course, you can also have the perception that everything that happens out there is a function of what's out there. There's nothing for me to do here. So my personality doesn't matter. My emotions don't matter. What matters is, do I have the right skills? Do I have the right resources? Do I have the right people to push me forward? To some extent, these are, but what determines whether you have the right people to push you forward, to put you in front of other right people? It is determined by the relationships you have with others. And the relationships are based on emotion. So these are not independent things. I didn't have the right people. Who you know, it's important who you know. And I didn't know the right people. Well, this could have been solved, and it could be solved now. You can get to know the right people by doing all the inner work. It's your own self-perceptions which affect how you relate to others, and that affects how you get to know certain people or not know certain people. These things are all interrelated, and they start from inner work, personality work, inner work. Let me put it this way. Relationship building, that's the last. So they used it for that as well. And the outcomes that they've experienced, actually, you can download these case studies. I'll give you the link later on in case you want to check them out, along with the bibliography of the instrument from our website. So this is just a summary of what they found. If you want more details, these companies had agreed to do like proper case studies and explain exactly how they use the instrument. So they witnessed improved working relationships, better customer interactions. How do you interact with your customers, right? This is sales and after-sales support. You got to be able to connect with them emotionally. That is very important for long-term relationships, for word of mouth, and so on and so forth. Better retention rates. Of course, this is a finding that we witness in study after study, that trait is negatively related to turnover. More effective emotional management in client services. This one is from Thames Police Force. We have a lot of usage in the defense and police contexts. Again, for obvious reasons, you find out how does police serve residents. There's so much emotion involved in there, from being able to handle your own emotions so you don't overreact, so you take correct decisions under stress, from also being able to read other people, what it is that they're trying to do and not trying to do. So they've integrated the TQ for many years now into the talent management program, and they're using it. And they have found out that program participants tend to enjoy higher promotion success rates, better leadership capabilities, better communication, and enhanced self-awareness in leadership styles. That ultra important self-awareness component. We build this self-awareness in our everyday life, in our interactions. So much stuff is being answered and resolved automatically simply by having increased, enhanced self-awareness. A lot of what causes problems and challenges in our life is to do with lack of self-awareness. And to some extent, we gain, most of us, not all, but to some extent, we gain self-awareness as we grow older, as we mature. And a lot of us, if we go back into our years of youth where we didn't have this developed self-awareness, say, is it really me who did that? At the time, we thought we were doing the right thing, or actually we didn't think about it twice. Certain major decisions that we look at right now and we hold our heads in our hands. Some of us anyway, not all of us, but that is and I see that I've misspelled enhanced here. That is a product of increased self-awareness. The question is it possible for us to boost self-awareness, maximize self-awareness right here and right now, so that we don't have to turn, say, 60 or 50 or 60 or 70 and look back and hold our heads in our hands because of wrong decisions, which at the time we thought were right, or we didn't think twice about. This is one of the rare programs that I actually delivered myself. I've stopped doing that, but in this case, it was an exception a few years ago. And in a huge Greek industrial conglomerate, metal and energy and metals, where we trained literally everyone, their entire workforce. We created videos about emotions for the entire workforce, based on the TQ, based on trait emotional intelligence theory, and then trained the senior directors internationally, along with TQ testing, Q&A, as well as intermediate directors. And there was a huge program over 45 days, training scores of individuals. And I did this personally a few years ago. So these are some examples, some of the companies that have stepped forward and they were okay with us talking about the sort of work that we've done for them. I mentioned before that this is in this slide, those case studies you can download from this link, along with the scientific bibliography of the instrument. There are, I don't know how many hundreds of scientific peer-reviewed studies in the literature. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. We have an incomplete bibliography in this link. That is the website for the scientific program. That is the website for the commercial applications, tq.com. And this is my personal LinkedIn site, and I will be delighted to link up with you. And now I am going into the more specifics about what trait emotional intelligence comprises. Okay, so I give this very broad and general introduction about why it is important. This is the Trait-AI model, and you will see here, these are specific narrow emotion-related traits: happiness, optimism, self-esteem, emotion regulation, impulse control, stress management, empathy, emotion perception, emotion expression, relationships, so on and so forth. There are 15 of them. They can be grouped under 4 broad domains of well-being, self-control, emotionality, sociability, and there are 2 independent facets. Those 4 domains and the 2 auxiliary facets can be grouped under this global trait emotional intelligence score. So that's another way of looking at it here. You can see the 15 narrow facets in the inner wheel, and these are the broad factors, and that's the global Trait-AI score. Now, this is what the TQ measures, and these are the building blocks, building elements of trait emotional intelligence theory. By measuring these 15 components and 4 factors in the global score, so in total, the TQ, the full form of the TQ gives access to 20 different scores, we get a snapshot of a comprehensive snapshot of an individual's emotional world. It's not exhaustive, obviously, but it is fairly comprehensive. And from that, we can understand a lot of things about what they've been, where they're going, how they relate to other people, how they should be related to leadership capabilities, decision-making, reward motivation preferences, as different people are sensitive to different kinds of rewards. That's also quite important to know in HR departments. You see, if you roll out a reward schedule, it may work for some and it may not work for others because different individuals are sensitive to different types of rewards. And this is this structure here, 1541. It's been established through multivariate statistics. I'm a psychometrician. I do a lot of statistics. And we've established this structure in many countries around the world. I've just got a very small subset here, but this is a structure that's been evidence-based and empirically driven, and it's been replicated in many countries around the world, including very relevantly today, India, with a general Indian sample covering most Indian states and UTs, union territories as well. So trait emotional intelligence is about your perceptions, as I said. Now, I'm saying a few things about how to interpret trait AI profiles. What is very important to understand is that trait AI is about perceptions, okay? It is not about so-called fixed abilities. We don't believe that there is an objective ability to understand your emotions, objective ability to understand other people's emotions, objective ability to... All of this is subjective. All of this is to do with perceptions. Your perceptions, more generally speaking, are your abilities. That's what I'm trying to get across. It's not an easy point to understand or to accept that what I believe about myself actually is an ability. What I think about myself is that the ability to influence, to change my perceptions is the most important ability when it comes to achieving in the outside world. You cannot go past, as I said before, a certain plateau, a certain ceiling with the wrong kind of perceptions. So your ability to change your perceptions is far more important than any kind of ability. There's only one ability, and that is the ability to change your perceptions. Change what you think about yourself, change what you think about the world, come out of this mindset of scarcity, this mindset of negativity, this mindset of limitation. So the next important thing in trait AI interpretations is that high scores are not necessarily good, low scores are not necessarily bad, unlike many other instruments out there. So the adaptive value of a particular score and TQ profile depends on the context and the situational demands. The same profile might be good and conducive for certain things, or a challenge for and a challenge for other things. And the same facet score, exactly the same facet score, it could be considered as too high in a particular context. It may be considered that you have an oversupply of this facet, but too low. The exact same score might be considered too low in a different circumstance. And let me give an example with assertiveness. Assertiveness is one of the important TQ facets, how assertive we are. The same assertiveness score may be seen as an advantage in a workplace environment because you are able to, if you're in a leading position, management position, you're able to direct others, you get them to work towards a common goal, give instructions, and so on and so forth. But when you take that same assertiveness into your home and you try to relate to your husband there, or your wife there, or your children there, it might be considered as oversupplied, too much assertiveness, create all sorts of problems at home. And how many successful managers and leaders and politicians we know who have had who are strong leaders, very decisive leaders, who have had no end of trouble and problems in their personal situations. Very often this is caused by inability to handle their assertiveness tendencies. So the TQ, that's a TQ profile. I mentioned this term several times before. That's the TQ profile that gives you your scores on the 15 facets, global score, and the 4 factors which you can't see in this particular case. But a TQ profile will have 15 scores on the 15 narrow facets that I mentioned before. It's these ones here. social awareness, adaptability, self-motivation, happiness, optimism, and so on and so forth. The 4 factors: well-being, emotionality, self-control, and sociability, and the global trait TI score. So 20 scores in total. And the scores are presented in the form of relative percentiles. So in this case that I've circled here, 92% is the score for this individual on emotion management. Emotion management in the TQ refers to the perception, the perceived ability that you have to manage the emotions of other people, how good you believe you are in terms of influencing the emotions and feelings of other people. This individual here has a score of 92% on the 92nd percentile, means their score is higher than 92% of the normative database. It's a high score. It's got obvious advantages to be able to influence other people's feelings, influence their emotions. Very important advantages, but it also has disadvantages because you might come across a lot of times as manipulative. You might be overly concerned with the emotions of others, and that might prevent you from taking tough decisions, and so on and so forth. So every score, high and low, on every facet comes with advantages and disadvantages. So that was just one example here. Yes, so for negative implications, in many times the positive implications are easier to understand. So let's say if we take another important TQ facet, they're all important, but some are more popular, let's put it this way, than others. Self-esteem. Okay, so everybody wants to have a high self-esteem. I mean, particularly in America, in the States, everybody needs to have a very high self-esteem. That's why. And there are obvious advantages about that, okay? Because we know that individuals with high self-esteem, they tend to adapt better in their environment, tend to do better in all sorts of, based on all sorts of indices and so on and so forth. But high self-esteem very often veers into narcissism. So narcissism is really an aberration of high self-esteem, right? So vast majority of, actually find me any narcissist who doesn't have a high self-esteem. They are individuals with high self-esteem who can't really manage their high self-esteem. It also makes you impervious to feedback. So if you work with individuals who have high self-esteem, and there might be your reports, there might be part of your team, there might be subordinates, let alone leaders. Actually, self-esteem tends to go higher as you go higher up in the organizational structure. Self-esteem tends to increase. But let's take an example now. We've taken several examples with managers and leaders. Let's take an example with subordinates. If you're trying to give feedback to a high self-esteem person, many times it will be difficult on many occasions because they're just unwilling or unable to accept feedback. They don't accept feedback so easily. So every facet and every score, high or low, on every facet comes with its advantages and disadvantages, and they need to be carefully weighed and understood. In selection and recruitment, where we have a lot of heavy TQ usage, the goal is to match specific TQ profiles to specific job roles, because what we're saying here is that every job role, every job function will call for a different kind of trait TI profile. The ideal trait TI profile will be different for a customer-facing service role than from a sales role, or from an HR role, or from a researcher role, somebody who needs to spend a lot of time working on the role, or from a driver role. If I drive a long-range vehicle or a taxi or whatever it is, I need a different trait TI profile than when I'm facing customers, or I'm leading others, or I'm in a work group situation, teamwork situation. So the goal is to match specific TQ profiles to specific job roles, and that is the slide that sort of gives you that, because there is a TQ instrument that allows you to profile jobs in your own organization. You have to understand here, and I'm sure that most of you do already, that every job role is unique, just like every individual is unique. That's why the role of a coach in this operation that we're running is extremely important. It's not a rule-based algorithmic based on judgments that we're looking for here, that this is the profile of the job, that's the profile of the individual. Do they match? Good. If they don't match, it's not like as simple as that. It is an important part of the process, but there needs to be an experienced HR person, an experienced coach, a human being with experience, with understanding of the role, of the function, of the culture of the company that will interpret this information. So what I'm saying is that this information is extremely important. I'm giving general directions. I'm giving a lot of examples. You'll find a lot more in our reports and in our materials, with very rich materials covering every single possibility and every single different context, if you like, but it will not cover every individual human being, every individual company. Different companies have different personality. A company has its own personality. So you need to have HR specialists, you need to have HR managers, you need to have HR directors with experience, with knowledge. This cannot be substituted or replaced by anything. It cannot be replaced by psychometrics. It cannot be replaced by AI. That's very important to understand. This kind of job cannot be done. It can be aided by artificial intelligence, aided and supported, and we do use quite a bit of AI in the development of our materials, analysis, and so on and so forth. But it is not possible for AI to replace human insight, human knowledge, human experience in this domain. We're looking for experienced HR professionals, HR individuals, coaches who are genuinely and earnestly interested in this kind of work, who will take the right decisions, aided by these materials, but the final say in all these decisions needs to be given by the HR expert, by the coach, not by an individual, not by the psychometrician, and certainly not by any kind of algorithm. It's simply not possible to use AI, because AI has zero insight, zero emotions, zero experience. It can aid the HR function, certainly, but it cannot replace it. And in those examples, because there is a huge, I'll be wrapping up in about 10 minutes for Q&A, but there are so many examples in the media out there because they're overhyping AI. You have to understand a lot of it is to do with investment purposes and trading purposes and so on and so forth. And they have all these examples where the HR function is being revolutionized by the arrival of AI. Well, if you look deep down in these examples, you're going to find out that you may have down the line very significant damage being caused by decisions that are not fully rounded out, and they're not fully informed, and they cause damage to the organization. This is very typical. Now, in those few cases where it is the case that the HR function has been revolutionized by the arrival of AI, which tends to concern entry-level jobs and entry-level very basic elementary HR functions, then you find out that the HR practitioner is becoming redundant. In other words, if it were the case that AI can come and replace the AI function, then it would also replace the HR role. There wouldn't be a role. If you find yourself as an HR practitioner, as an HR person, relying more and more on AI and doing more and more things with AI, I would suggest that you are not taking the right decisions. Simply, it's not possible for software and algorithms to have a human insight, human understanding of emotions to take the right decisions. So if you do accept this kind of incursion of AI in your own function, then you may well find your own position redundant, because there's always someone higher up who says, well, okay, why then, if AI is taking all these rule-based decisions, algorithmic decisions, basically unsupervised, well, why do I not need the HR function anyway? Let's just replace that with AI. This is not going to happen, I have to say. This is not going to happen without anybody who tries that. Sooner or later is going to find very big problems in their organization, because AI at best can make some suggestions. The HR practitioner needs to have the understanding, the psychological, experiential, occupational understanding in order to take the right decisions for the human beings that they're dealing with, for the organizations, human organizations that they're operating within. and so on and so forth. So I don't see AI as a threat to HR. I see it as a tool, but it will not negate the importance and the necessity for the HR practitioner and the coach to understand their subject matter. If anything, it will become more and more important, you see, because a lot of those functions that used to take an enormous amount of time, like say, being able to draft notices or draft regulations in English, for those of us for whom English is not the first language, might take an enormous amount of time trying to put things in the correct grammar, use the right words, or if you're a coder, to code things or to create flyers. These things can be done very, very fast. But the content that you need to put there, that needs to come from you. That will always be the case. If you start relying on generic AI content, you will get things wrong, and eventually you will find yourself redundant because you're not really contributing anything significant. You're just taking the lowest common denominator, which is what those AI solutions do. I don't have much time to go into faking. Maybe it's going to come up in the questions time. I want to say a few things about products very quickly here. If you go to our TQ website, you'll find more information about them. But this is quite interesting because it gives you a flavor of the type of functions that the psychometric products can discharge. So there are personal reports, which are very important for individuals who are interested in self-development. I have written all the reports myself, I should say. Most of them don't even have AI editing. A couple will have AI editing, but these certainly don't. Personal, corporate, I've written them entirely on my own. I spent an enormous amount of time doing so. So these are reports that help the individual interpret the TQ feedback. I never advise anybody to rely solely on these reports produced by the system. So these are the reports that can provide common ground between a coach or an HR practitioner and the individual involved. But there needs to be human interpretation, because in many cases it will be the case that maybe the report will be suggesting 2 or 3 different things and only one of them will be applicable. Maybe the report will be suggesting one thing, but actually that thing will not apply in that particular situation. A coach, an HR practitioner needs to be there to moderate these feedback. Nevertheless, I've done my best to create these reports that provide a entry into the feedback processes, an entry point into the feedback process, which needs to be curated by expert HR individuals and coaches. So the personal report, and the language here is quite direct, and it goes fairly deep in psychological matters. That's often not what we want in a corporate environment. So in a corporate environment, many times we need language that is less direct, it's less personal. So that's what the corporate report does. It's specifically for use in corporations that are very sensitive for certain matters, for good or bad, that is the case. So the language is less direct there, it's less personal. Leadership reports for those who want to cultivate the leadership ability in them, for managers, executive leaders, anyone aspiring to such positions. You need to understand, those individuals need to understand what makes someone a leader. What makes a degree from Ahmedabad or a degree from Harvard or a degree from London or Oxbridge is not going to make you a leader. It might place you into a leadership position, but that's not what's going to make you a leader. So you want to know what really makes someone a leader, and you could be a leader and be completely outside of this system. You can be a leader. Hey, in the Indian context, so okay, how many leaders do you know of individuals who are leaders and sitting in the middle of forests, and then the world beats a pathway to them? Yes, that's not because they have degrees, they have something else. And of course, the ability to understand their own emotions and the ability to understand the emotions of the people they serve is quite central to that. So if you want to hone in these perceptions, these traits, these competencies, the TQ leadership report is quite important, can help. We have all sorts of products for recruitment, for development, the developmental reports of the TQ. The developmental reports answer this question. So you get your TQ personal or corporate report. The developmental report answers this question. What now? So now that I know what my emotional constitution is, having taken the instrument, and I know what my emotional constitution is, what now? What can I do about it now? What should I do about it now? Now, some of the answers are going to be obvious to someone. Okay. The thing is that a lot of us don't have any insight into our personality. We've never been interested in that. Yes. So the TQ is like holding a mirror for your emotional world. Okay, so we check out our body every time that we go out there to work or whatever it is. We check out what the body looks like. Now, the TQ is like a mirror that helps you understand what your emotional state looks like. Yes, and once you understand it, automatically you'll be able to smooth out or round out certain behaviors, certain traits, certain proclivities that you have automatically. But some others might need a little more insight, and that's what the TQ developmental report helps you do. We've got a new TQ DISC system. Some of you might be familiar with the DISC system: dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness. We can derive that from the TQ system. Those of you who are familiar will know what I'm talking about. Those of you who are not, I don't have the time to explain because I want to leave some time for Q&A. But the DISC system can be derived from the TQ, and the Big Five system can also be derived from the TQ for scientific reasons that I do not have time to explain. But if you're interested, I can point you to the right publication. All sorts of team reports. How do we put together a team, right? How do we put together a team? Let's say for training, we might be having an away or off-site day, and we want to be working in groups. How can we sort out groups? You know, is there a way that we can find out the groups that are emotionally compatible instead of allocating individuals based on their surnames or the department? If we want to do something that brings different people together, but we want to find out whether they are emotionally compatible. That's what the TQ team selection reports allow us to do. And finally, I'm going to close with saying a few things about the compatibility report. This is one of the latest things that I've been working on, whether two TQ profiles, you see an example of a TQ profile there, whether two different TQ profiles are compatible or not. Isn't that important? I say that it is extremely important when you go into a relationship with a long-term relationship with someone to check out whether you are emotionally compatible or not. Now, you're not going to get the answer right every single time with this. Absolutely not. But you're doing due diligence, remember? So if I'm getting into a relationship with someone, should I not check and do a business relationship? Would it not make sense to check for whether we are emotionally compatible? I'm not talking about relationships that are actually forced on us. You know, I might be starving for cash, and then a venture angel investor comes along, and I desperately need the cash to bring my idea into fruition, right? So I have to think, yeah, that's just, it seems that there is no option there. So I'm not talking about these situations. I'm talking about situations where I might have to choose from certain individuals to go into business with, like a business partner or a merger, or certainly the world of romantic relationships comes into play when I'm going into a long-term relationship with my spouse, to also check, are we emotionally compatible? Or in what areas are we compatible? In what areas are we incompatible? So that we can actually plan for these things. That's just doing due diligence. And these are the compatibility TQ reports, and many, many other things that I don't have a lot of time to talk about, but I've given you the slides, and you can see we also have like a short IQ test available, and my other theory, which is the belief importance theory. I don't have time to go into this, but I have a whole gamut of products trying to understand personality, trying to understand the emotions in ourselves and in other people, and how we can leverage this understanding and this information to reach better decisions at work. That's it. No, I promised to stop here. Again, we didn't. I mean, this is probably a 2-hour talk, but I want to spend some time with Q&A. And if you have access to the slides, which I hope you do, I'm very happy to speak to a particular slide that I didn't have time to cover. I think I've already said a few things about artificial intelligence. So if you want more, you can ask in the Q&A. And another, I'll just close with this, literally 1 minute. There is a huge, I believe, field of opportunity and, in fact, need out there, and particularly in the Western world, to bring out Vedic concepts, Vedic ideas into the Vedic world, starting from the world of work, into the Western world, starting from the world of work. So instead of being importers of Western tools, which the TQ is not a Western tool. I said it's been Westernized. It's a Westernized tool, but it's not a Western tool. It is a Vedic tool. But it's also possible to have more obviously Vedic tools, like, for example, the three gunas, Raja, Sattva, Tamas. I find this like such important concepts that are so important in the world of work, how we relate with other people. Now, you relate to people differently if they're sattvic or rajasic or tamasic, if they have this general tendency. And of course, this tendency can be changed from circumstance to circumstance. Somebody who's rajasic might fall into tamas and so on and so forth. But being able to take these energies into account in the world of work is a very promising area of inquiry. And I think that this is the right direction of travel. In closing this talk, the right direction of travel is to Westernize Vedic concepts, which is what the TQ, Trait Emotional Intelligence, Psychobionomy do, to Westernize Vedic concepts rather than Indianize Western concepts. So instead of importing Western instruments, Indianizing them, exporting Vedic instruments and Westernizing them is the right direction of travel for this sort of material, for this sort of product. And with this, I would like to thank you so much for your presence here today. Again, I would like to thank Anjali Bais. I'd like to thank Akram Mitra. I would really like to thank Rajat Mishra for making this possible and giving me space into the Strabag headquarters to be able to talk to you from today. Thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to trying to answer your questions. Thank you.